growing up, I was an only child. My mother suffered a lot of health problems. So there wasn't really any resolve for me to be okay with not doing as good as I can. Learning to fail meant learning how to see failure in a different way.
Welcome to Women Talk Tech, the podcast for business professionals committed to advancing women in the tech sector.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Women Talk Tech. I'm your host, Marie Weiss. And today, my guest is Lexi Kubrick. And Lexi has a really interesting job title. Right now, she's running her own business, working for a variety of companies who are doing AR, VR, AI experiences. That's a lot of letters, but we'll tell the audience what that means in a minute. She's been doing some global marketing and app development work. But here's the word that really pops out when I read Lexi's bio. She is a futurist. She challenges companies to look further into the content they produce and how it's going to impact their overall business and revenue. And I have to say that that interests me more than you can believe. I really have a big interest in this kind of work. And we've talked a lot about AI on the show in the past. So welcome to the show, Lexi. It's a pleasure to have you. And we're going to hit you with our first question as we ask all of our guests. Did you always want to do this? Is technology where you wanted to go?
Well, I mean, my dad was he was actually an electronic technologist back in the 70s. So you can imagine at that point in time, he went to Mohawk College and then to McMaster University to essentially be an electrical engineer. And many years he worked at the airport dealing with all of the advanced aeronautical technology. And I came up being this little like crazy nomad goth girl who wanted to get into music and wanting to get into A&R. And, you know, I had no idea how tiring it was. I was not made out to be out for, 90% of my day. But that's what I wanted to do. Fashion and music. I loved it. I mean, I grew up on much music. I grew up on all that stuff. But tech has always been in the background, right? I have my first laptop, which was an IBM when I was 3 years old. So that was a big honking thing. And I programmed my own snake game on it. I guess it was Snake's Pac-Man. That's it. So you had to still like take the floppy disks.
I loved Pac-Man.
Yeah, you had to take the floppy disks and formulate it and CDOS run and everything like that. But I never could get to the point of coding, and I always thought that was like the end of my career because I couldn't sit there having at that point in time an undiagnosed ADHD as many girls did. To sit there and code. That wasn't me. I wasn't good at math. I wasn't good at that. So I never thought at that point in time, tech would be my future. But since 2010, leaving university, that has been my life. That has really been my life.
So how did you step into it after university? What was the first thing, what was the first role you took and how did you step into tech?
It was actually in HR, and it was with a company called Radical Events. And Jeff Webb, who ran it at the time, he was bringing all of these HR people together. He ran the first, North American Unconference, which was essentially bring everybody together, sit them down, let them, scream at each other about what works and what doesn't. And, that's where I met a wonderful woman, Catherine Fennell, who is a video bio. I met people like Amber Osborne, who works in the tech world, specifically with VR right now. And we just sat there and like ruminated. Like I had no idea in human resources, just the amount of platforms that go behind the scenes before you get to the point of being able to sit down and talk with somebody. And that fascinated me, that ecosystem, that this one platform that seems innocuous to us actually has this ROI of millions of dollars for a company because it streamlines their process.
So for those listeners who aren't familiar with the term VR, we're talking about virtual reality, correct?
Yes.
The term AR refers to
Augmented reality.
Sorry?
Augmented reality.
Augmented reality.
Yeah, so there's a difference. Augmented reality, you generally go on the phone. It's a web experience and you get to hold it up, and oftentimes it's those little filters. You may see a dancing bear at the bottom of your table. But VR generally tends to be the headset and what we're used to.
Cool. Okay. Thanks for sharing that. The thing that really struck me that I thought was so interesting about you is you focus a lot on innovation and problem solving in the tech space. And I have to say, all of the guests that we've had on at some point said something about problem solving, something about, I was good at problem solving, so somebody put me in the customer service help desk at HP, or, something where they brought those problem solving skills to the table. And women are unbelievably resourceful and incredible problem solvers, and they naturally fit in tech. But we still struggle to kind of convince young women this is where they should be going. So you have a really results-oriented mindset. How did you get that? Where'd that come from?
I think it first came from the fact that, growing up, not getting sentimental here, but my grandparents were Polish and Ukrainian going through World War II. So there was no room for crying in my family. If they could do it literally, they say, if I had to do this in Siberia, you can get up and do it again. So there was no idea of, this, you can't do it attitude. You figure out a way. And if you can't figure out a way, you find somebody who can figure it out. There was never a moment where it was, this is the end of the world, we're done, whatever. My grandmother always said this thing, and it sounds kind of violent, but even if there's a gun to your head, pull the trigger. You don't have to pay taxes. And I think it's fair, and that sort of mentality does, move forward. But, growing up, I was an only child. My mother suffered a lot of health problems. So there wasn't really any resolve for me to be, okay with not doing as good as I can. And, learning to fail meant learning how to see failure in a different way.
And I think that's something a lot of people struggle with. We don't want to say, oh, we failed at that. And yet, oftentimes, my biggest flops have been my biggest learning opportunities. And I think, we're now starting to talk about that a little bit more in the broader ecosystem, and people are starting to embrace that a little bit more. I want to jump to this topic, though, that I love. As a futurist, you've emphasized the need to challenge companies and look further into what they're producing, the content particularly. So tell us what you think is going to happen in 2024. I mean, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what are your theories about 2024 and where we're all heading? And especially, if I had to look back, and you might have a different opinion, but if I had to look back at 2023 as an example, I would say, 2023 was the unveiling of AI to the broader marketplace. If those who are, been in the tech sector for a long time know that the conversation around around AI has been happening for a long time. But 2023 is suddenly when it was accessible to everyone. And what do you think 2024 is looking like?
Well, there's a meme out there, which I really love because I love Stanley Kubrick. And it said, back in 1968, there was a movie that introduced moving screens being watched on tablets. And then AI came out and killed everybody. And I have to disagree with that. I think right now, as a society, as humans trying to be right now, we have all of this turmoil going on. The way we choose to adapt AI to our everyday lives will really dictate whether or not we see it as part of our team or part of our oppression. And, I think even just as a socioeconomic region, let's call it a region in North America, I mean, capitalism is still at a teenage rebellious spirit. We don't know what to do with it. We know that we can get a lot out of it, but we don't know how to inject it into our daily lives in a positive way enough for it to have a positive outcome. What I'm seeing right now with Reflector Digital, and they're specifically in more of the immersive, experiential advertising, but also customer retail space, is that people don't want novelty anymore. They don't want something that's going to be there for a month. They want something that's actually going to be ingrained in the entire process. So for instance, they're working on a real estate web, but immersive experience, which basically lets you go in and customize your condo all in augmented reality, all in VR, that you can do from the website, that kind of lets you see everything as it is. And it's an industry game changer because to this point, you just saw pictures, you saw numbers, you pick colors, you pick finishes, you don't actually experience it. And right now we want to experience more. We don't want to be sold more. So I think with Apple Vision coming out specifically and how they're sort of turning what Google Glasses was on its head by making it more usable, it's still something on your face. It's still going to be intrusive. But really elevating that daily need. What do I need this for? Well, I need to be able to get up and stand around. I don't want to sit at a computer. I need to be able to rip apart blueprints and pick apart different things. We're now growing up from a Disney perspective and trying to make these things real, but functional. Mm-hmm. So that's what I see. I think we're moving from this novelty space into more of a functional space. And I've seen some, even just with AI and ChatGPT, some people really building crazy stuff using, these prompts that they've actually thought about, which again, revolutionizes how we see tech workers, how we see tech innovation, because maybe it's not going to be as, my husband builds together and tinkers with specific broadcast hardware. Maybe the next thing is that we have a hardware, but now we have to build the software to change it and revolutionize the software. And the people who know and use those clever tricks to change that software into something new are going to be the ones who come out on top.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I've seen so many, big monumental revolutions in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. I've seen some pretty major things go down across the board in business, and particularly in business to business marketing. I want to ask you a question about social media. And I know it seems a little unfair, but I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
What are your thoughts about the social media platforms these days, and where are they heading?
I think they're a dumpster fire. Honestly. It's funny, when I was in college, we were, part of my studies within the, culture, communication, information tech at UTM was looking at how the evolution of communication is going to impact the way we use these technologies. And we were sitting there, not going to lie, probably under some inebriants, ruminating about, well, what if this person gets into the presidency and this person gets into the presidency? And this was at the dawn of Twitter. So we were seeing some bad behavior already. Now, come 2016, when I saw that rumination turn into reality based on essentially what was just a Twitter war, it kind of scared me. It off-put me. And even now I'm seeing colleagues who are doing really well on TikTok, doing really well in their business, but other colleagues who are working their butts off every day trying to make their business work, doing monumental things, but they're not getting the recognition because they're not on a social media platform. Mm-hmm. This is where I'm saying, like, that adolescence, we need to come and shake our heads off and figure it out because, everybody wants a soapbox. I know the psychology behind it. I know this behavior of being on a podcast is going to make me feel great the rest of the day because I got to talk about myself. But it doesn't leave room for real problems at the end of the day. It doesn't leave room to solve anything. And I don't think social media has solved anything except our own need to feel special. And that can be a generational thing, especially when you're looking at some of the Gen X's on there. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I couldn't, I do think it's a dumpster fire right now. I think these platforms are over-engineered. I think they're designed now to sell us stuff, not to actually spur real conversations. Again, if I think about business to business marketing, one of our most important platforms is LinkedIn. And I see what's happening on LinkedIn, and it's just a big broadcast of look at me.
Yeah.
It's not real conversations happening. And yet, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. But I would really love somebody to come up with something. I hope there's something new that we see in the future where we can move away from selling and we can move back to real conversations. And I don't know, maybe people don't enjoy that because real conversations are hard. Solving problems is hard.
Real conversations mean that you have to admit that there's a failure or you don't know anything. And I think that's with the common social media era now is everybody wants to be an expert.
Yeah.
And we don't recognize what we don't know. And that's a dangerous thing because you come off, even too, like scrolling LinkedIn, you're talking about it. And I'm just getting to the point where I'm saying, why are you encouraging a bad thought? Why are you saying something so generic? You're supposed to be somebody who knows, everything about everything, doing so well in your business. Why are you giving me more shopping channel crap? Like it turns me off because I don't want that. I don't think it's another platform. I think it's people willing to sort of start using the platform back in that discussion saying, you know what, I see you get 100 likes on this. That's great, but you're wrong. I don't think about that. And people engaging in a thoughtful way. But again, we're adolescents in that sense that we're told we're wrong or we see a conflicting view and it doesn't really turn out very well online.
It's such an interesting era that we're living in. And you've mentioned, challenges that we're having globally and how we look at these things and how we consume information. I'm interested though now about, dig a little deeper into your own career and the things that you've done in the past. Has there ever been a moment in your career where you faced, a really big challenge? Maybe somebody wasn't being empathetic. Maybe, you had some self-imposed obstacles that you were trying to overcome. Was there a pivotal moment that you can look back on and say sort of, this is what happened and here's what I did?
I think if somebody doesn't have that at least every quarter, you're not doing something good.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, share one then.
I think that situation of shifting happened at the end of my tenure at one class. I had started with them before the pandemic. And it was great because we had a lot of opportunities. One class was a note sharing platform. They were just launching a tutoring division. They were focusing on universities. So everything everybody needed at that point in time. And I was there for almost 3 years and we did some good work. But, we went from a company of over 200 people downtown Toronto, plus many more around the world, to a company of 10. And watching decisions being made, but situations coming up because of the organization of the business, just put challenge after challenge after challenge. And it was, and still is, a fantastic company to work for. The people there are amazing. But I would never want to experience what Jack, who the CEO has had to experience, watching that company burst, grow so much for 10 years, and then have to get back to brass tacks. And when I left that, it was hard because these people who had spent all of this time, and in some cases it was trauma, because you're seeing every day, everything you're doing is failing. You're seeing your friends get sick. You're seeing all of this happening in a span of 3 years. And then it's just over. And no one's returning your calls and no one's saying this or that, or no, oh yeah, I'm going to help you, and you don't help you. And that's where I sort of realized, no, I'm really on my own. If I'm an employee, I'm in this work family. It's not really a family. You don't make friends for life there. You make friends in life if you're, part of entrepreneurial organizations or you're doing this on your own, because there's a level of respect there. that doesn't happen when you're just an employee.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's an interesting, thank you for sharing that, by the way, because that's a very interesting one. And I think everybody in the tech sector has experienced that at least once. It's high risk, oftentimes with some of the companies that are more sort of startup or founder led.
Mm-hmm.
And we go through incredible learning, but we also have incredible heartbreak. And I think that's a really interesting point to bring up. It's not all rosy, right? There's incredible heartbreak that transpires when, really hard decisions have to get made. And, I invested money in a company and worked there for 4 years while there was a fire sale going on because of mismanagement.
Mm-hmm.
And ended up having to sell really quickly. And now you're going through a merger or an acquisition. And now you don't know what your job is on a daily basis. You don't know who to trust. You don't know who you should be talking to. It creates a really weird vibe. And I think I could be wrong, but I don't think there's any other sector that probably offers this kind of opportunity and this kind of heartbreak. Am I wrong about that?
Well, first of all, I'm sorry you had to go through that. That's a very tough thing to deal with, especially when you're looking at your financial health and you believe in something and it doesn't. So, good on you for getting over that. But I think tech is high risk, high reward, but also high risk and dumpster fire because we always expect tech to be the next best thing. But there's one next best thing and 1,000 other snake oil salesmen.
Yeah.
And with my other client in the app marketing world, everybody wants to build an app. Everybody wants to build something new. And this is going to be the Uber of. And the thing is that you can't be Uber. There's
only one Uber, and it's an outlier, really. When you think about it, it's an outlier. It's not the norm, right?
And that's
neither is Amazon, neither is Google.
And that's part of the problem we saw last year with VCs hanging on to these unicorns is they promised, to be this or to be this. And the thing is, we have to get back to the idea that it's okay for a tech company to have a ceiling. If you're self-sustaining and everybody's paid properly and you're making a little bit of profit, you're doing okay. You're not going to have $600 a share. You don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
But I think tech also is one of the industries that there is such inequality. That's where we get this idea that we have to do this because this is our only chance to win the lottery. Because we see our colleagues making 6 figures, 7 figures in other companies, and we want to do that.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciate this conversation. And listeners, I've been speaking with Lexi Kubrick, and she's a consultant who considers herself she is, in the work that she's done, a vanguard in marketing operations, and she helps executives move forward. Very innovative, a futurist, which I love, and obviously has her hand on the pulse of the tech world. I really appreciate your honesty because I do think some of these conversations are kind of the downside of being in startups and being in high growth, high risk companies. And I think we hear about these things. And I remember at one time, and I particularly lived through a moment in the tech sector when there was a ton of IPOs, and every IPO there was a t-shirt. And I remember somebody having all these t-shirts that they had collected over the years, and all the companies were defunct now. And they kind of made this joke about, here's all the t-shirts and all the companies I've worked for, and none of them are still in business. But that's what innovation's about. And I think that we're sitting on the sidelines of yet another revolution in the tech sector as we look at what AR, VR, AI, all those great letters are going to do to us and for us. So thank you for sharing your thoughts today. And thanks for bringing some of that reality home, because I think that's important. I do think, though, it's great that you've been in the tech sector from the beginning, even though you resisted it at first. And we need more people like you. I've been speaking with Leslie Kubrick, and this has been another episode of Women Talk Tech. Thank you so much for being here, Lexi. And as always, to our listeners, thanks so much for listening.
Thanks, Marie. Thanks, everyone.